What's on, ladies and gentlemen? My name's Ross, I like games, and today we're going to do a little video that I've been planning for a little while, but I've not had a chance to get round to. Well, today, ladies and gentlemen, today I've gone and found myself some time. We are going to look at the best ways to stop your opponent forging a key in an emergency. The best emergency you cannot forge cards in Keyforge. I'll have to think about how I put that in the description. That's a problem for later. The best cards to say to your opponent, oh, you thought you were going to forge a key. Oh, that's so cute. No, you're not forging a key. Now, there's a few things that I don't think really count. Irradiated Ember is great. If your opponent's got 6 or more Ember, you deal 3 damage to each enemy creature. It's great for taking advantage of their stack of Ember, but it doesn't stop them forging. Things like Urchin are great at stealing Ember, and look, I know that some of you out there will have decks of an amazing suite of Shadows cards, and you will use those suites of Shadow cards to steal 10, 15 Ember in one turn. I know that you've got a deck that sometimes will go, oh, you've got 14 Ember, and steal all of it before the end of the turn. That's fine, but I'm looking for the one-card Silver Bullets, so I know there's lots of great Shadow cards that can stop people forging when you use them all together. It's not what we're talking about today. I'm also not talking about the things that increase the cost of forging keys. So we've got, for instance, Lash of Broken Dreams over in Dis, which increases the cost of forging by 3, which is pretty high. Untamed have got Murmook, which increases the cost of forging by 1. And then if you go over to Mars, they've got both Grabber Jammer, which increases the cost by 1, and Jammer Pack, which increases the cost by 2. Though you could always put a Jammer Pack onto a Grabber Jammer, and it would be +3. Lash of Broken Dreams is the best one of these, but it's an action that lasts for a turn, whereas the other ones I've mentioned are static and are always working. And finally, I'm not talking about Keyhammer. Keyhammer is great because it basically just gives your opponent their Ember back, but it also gets rid of their key. But that is not good if your opponent just forge their 3rd key. For keys 1 and 2, yes. For key 3, no. Don't use this for key 3. You can't. You've already lost the game. One fun little side note here, you give your opponent or they gain 6 Ember. It's not from you, it's from the common pool. So if they forged it at 9 because of Lash of Broken Dreams, they only get 6 back. Please remember, though, that if they didn't forge a key last turn and you play this, you do as much as you can. Your opponent gained 6 Ember. That's bad. So if I'm not talking about those cards, what cards am I talking about? And honestly, ladies and gentlemen, there aren't very many. There are very few cards in Call of the Archons. We've not seen enough from Age of Ascension yet. There are not that many cards in Call of the Archons that are these amazing Silver Bullet cards. Brobnar's got one, but it's not really good enough. They've got Burn the Stockpile. Burn the Stockpile reads, if your opponent has 7 or more Ember, they lose 4 of them. Here's the deal. If they've got 9, 8, or 7 Ember, this will stop them forging a key. But they might have 12 Ember. You play Burn the Stockpile, they lose 4 of them. They still get to forge a key. I'm not saying this isn't a disruptive card. And I'm not saying this isn't a useful card. And I'm not saying it's not the kind of card which you really want to draw when your opponent is about to forge a key. But I very much am saying it's not a great Silver Bullet card because there's going to be plenty of turns where your opponent goes, that's annoying, but I had 12 Ember. I can still forge a key. And I've been there. I don't have Burn the Stockpile in any of my decks personally, but I've had my friends drop Burn the Stockpile against me and gone, oh, that was annoying, but I can still forge a key, so it's not too bad. Now, Logos have got one, and Logos have got a very nice one indeed. Effervescent Principle. Now, Effervescent Principle is a weird one, because it hurts you as well. It reads, each player loses half their Ember, rounding down the loss, gain 1 chain. So this is not one you can just drop willy-nilly. If you've got, say, 8 Ember and your opponent's got 8, you can drop it to stop them forging a key on their turn, but you're also stopping yourself forging a key on your next turn, which is, shall we say, less than ideal. The other thing is, this might, like we said with Burn the Stockpile, this might not actually stop your opponent forging a key. Because you see, let's say your opponent's got 16 ember. You drop an Effervescent Principle, they've only got 8 remaining. Oh, hang on a second. The default amount to forge a key is 6. That you might be comboing this with like 4 Mermook, and that's fine. But otherwise, they are going to be able to forge an ember here, and that's going to be slightly upsetting. Now, the counter argument is, in any situation where you've taken them from like 20 ember down to 10, you've still stopped them forging a key. It's just not this key, it's the next key. But then again, going back to what I said about Keyhammer, what if they've only got 1 key left to forge? If they need to forge 1 key to win the game, and they've got 20 ember and you drop this and pass the turn, they're going to forge and win the game. Now, I'm being a little bit pedantic here with Effervescent Principle, because 90% of the time, probably more than that, this will easily be enough. But then you've also got the downside of try not to use it in a situation where you're trying to forge a key, because otherwise it can hurt you as well. It's the best card that you've got in logos, so we do need to take it seriously. If we flip into Sanctum, honestly, this might be my favourite one. When I say my favourite one, I am looking at purely stopping them forging. Just a pure, unadulterated, you shall not forge. You see, Doorstep to Heaven over in Sanctum says that every player with 6 or more ember is reduced down to 5. Now, what I love about this is it doesn't matter how much ember your opponent actually has. If your opponent has 47 ember, you drop them down to 5. If they've got 6 ember, you drop them down to 5. Unless there is a Titan mechanic on the field or something of that nature which reduces the cost of forging a key, you will be able to do this. You will be able to stop your opponent forging a key. In terms of purely stopping your opponent forging a key, I think this might be the best one that we've got. It is phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal. Although we do need to go back to Effervescent Principle here and remind ourselves, what if you've got a dozen ember here? It will stop you forging as well. It's not necessarily the end of the world. If your opponent's about to forge their 3rd key, this will stop them and buy you some time. But please do remember, ladies and gentlemen, that this can hurt you as much as your opponent. Still though, if your opponent is about to forge and you absolutely, positively have to stop them forging right now, this is probably the best answer we've got. And then we end up with Shadows, and Shadows have got 2 different options here. The one that most people think about initially is Bait and Switch, and I am not dumb enough to sit here and try and argue that Bait and Switch is not a phenomenal card. Clearly, Bait and Switch is a phenomenal card. If you're behind in the game. If you're ahead in the game, it doesn't work. One of the amazing things about Bait and Switch, because it's a Shadows card, it steals. If your opponent has more ember than you, steal 1. Repeat this card's effect if your opponent still has more ember than you. I.e., if your opponent's got more ember than you, if there is an even number between the 2 of you, you have the same amount each, you get half of the combined. If there's an odd number with you and your opponent, you end up with 1 more than they do. Cool. That sounds good. Bait and Switch is probably the best card in the game at the moment. Certainly the best card in Call of the Archons. It has proven itself to be. It is the great equalizer. It is a kind of card that stops your opponent jumping too far ahead. If they've got 12 ember and you've got none, you go to 6 ember each. Now, this might not stop your opponent forging a key, because they might still, if there are 12 ember on the field between you and your opponent, you'll end up with 6 each. That's not good, because they can still forge. Having said that, come on, if you're playing Bait and Switch, unless it's some weird maverick, which it is in some decks, but very, very rare, then you just need to steal 1 more ember, but you're on a Shadows turn, so just play an Urchin or something and you'll be fine. It's not the end of the world, it really isn't. The thing about bait and switch is it is the most impactful card in the game because it can both stop your opponent forging while putting you on the road to forging at the same time. If they've got 9 Ember and you've got 1, you end up with 5 each. You reap with 1 creature and all of a sudden you've got enough to forge and they don't. Might not always stop them forging, but it will if the combined amount of Ember between the two of you is 11 or less. If it's 12 or more, they should still be able to forge. But it is going to go a long way towards it. And then we've got a card which could be argued to be better. It's Too Much to Protect. Now, Too Much to Protect is a little bit of a weird one. It says that if your opponent has 7 or more Ember, you steal until they've got 6 remaining. It actually says steal all but 6 of your opponent's Ember, but same deal. Plus, you even get an Ember bonus when you play it, just in case it wasn't good enough anyway. I love this. Because not only can you stop your opponent forging, but you get all of their Ember. So whereas bait and switch will essentially, best case scenario, give you half, this gives you all but 6. So if they end up with 20 Ember, let's assume you've got none. Well, bait and switch would give you 10 of their 20 Ember. Too Much to Protect would give you 14. Now, the thing to remember is Too Much to Protect puts them down to 6. You will still need to steal 1 more Ember to stop them forging next turn. So if it's all you've got, it won't stop them, but it's going to get you 1 Ember away on a Shadow's turn. And as I've talked about in previous videos, including one video dedicated to it, the thing that Shadows are really good at is stealing Ember, so I wouldn't worry your pretty little head. You're probably going to have something to stop them. Bait and Switch is generally seen as the better card, because you really even it up and you can bring them down below 6 Ember. But if they've got a lot of Ember, Too Much to Protect is probably the better of the two. Either way, Shadows is where you're going here because you've got both of them and they're both phenomenal. Just a quick side note as we finish here, Untamed don't have any of these, but Untamed does have the card Mimicry, which lets you basically copy an action card in your opponent's discard pile. So all the ones I've mentioned in this video are actions, so even though Untamed doesn't actually have any of their own, they can use Mimicry to, well, copy any of them. Only after your opponent's used it, but still, Mimicry does deserve mentioning. So there we go, ladies and gentlemen. Those are the best cards we've got to stop your opponent forging in an emergency. And as a quick side note, the best decks in Keyforge tend to either have one of these or ridiculous Ember generation. When I'm appraising a deck nowadays, this is very much one of the first things I look for. Does it have one of these cards in? Because if I see a deck that has none of these in, general rule of thumb, it's either got nuts Ember generation, at which point it's still actually quite vulnerable to these, or it's not worth it and you should probably not take that deck too seriously, as mean as that might sound. So there we go, ladies and gentlemen. Now it's time for you guys to get involved. Tell me which of these is your favourite card. Tell me your stories involving these cards. Because, let's face it, Keyforge is nothing if not a game where stories is made. And tell me if there are any cards you think deserve to be in this video that I haven't mentioned. Go nuts, ladies and gentlemen, but please do remember the rule. Be nice, would ya? And then make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, and follow me on Twitter at the Wossy, where we talk about games. Like Keyforge, but also a bunch of others. But by far the most important thing as always, look after yourselves till next time. Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross and you've been watching Wossy Plays.